Parabola. When you woke up this morning, did you purposely say, I'm going to confine myself to a box? Or do you just avoid putting any conscious thought into today? When you're busy going at it, literally or figuratively, do you ever find yourself pausing for a moment to realize what's going on? Or are you just reacting? When you hear the saying, "May I have your attention, please," do you continue as you were, or do you consider the information you're about to receive might actually be valuable? When I was growing up, my mother used to ask me to do things, and sometimes her reasoning was, because I said so. Looking back, I wish perhaps I took the time to pause, think, and consider the ramifications of my choices. Good Friday to you. Today is Friday, September 16, 2016, and this is episode number 5 of Pause, Think, Consider. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. We've had a great first week on this podcast and lots of interaction on Facebook. For those of you that would like to comment, give feedback, please visit on Facebook. It's facebook.com/pause.think.consider. Today's topic is on #squad. #squad. For all information on this, you can go to pausethinkconsider.com/squad. So, #squad is this. It's become a little bit of a movement, if you will. And for those of you that are not aware of what the #squad is, or I think technically it's probably just squad, but it's a fancy way, if you will, of describing your circle or describing the people that you surround yourself with, or the word that I don't personally like to use very much, but your mentors or influence group is your squad. And so where did this idea of the #squad all come from? Where's the epicenter? What am I even talking about? And ultimately, it comes from Taylor Swift. And what I found interesting about this, and I think goes along with a lot of the topics that we've been talking about this week, about being lazy and the art of listening and self-awareness, is your influencers and the environment that you put yourself in. And so this concept that essentially T Swift, I don't know that she necessarily is the creator or the originator, or maybe it's just the media that created it for her, or potentially she's the one who started it. But this whole idea of a squad is the people that you surround yourself, your inner circle. And so much of this defines who you are, how you are, where you're going to go, how you're going to get there. And there's a couple of interesting articles that I stumbled upon, not on stumble upon, but stumbled upon. A couple of them include 5 of the most successful hashtags of all time to inspire your campaign. And if you go and you read this article, again, you can go to pausethinkconsider.com/squad. This will give you a little bit more background about the #squad and how it came to be, and why it was so popular and why it continues to be very prevalent. Another one that talks about and indirectly describes squad and your circle and so forth is why I hate the phrase "fake it till you make it" and a few alternatives. Why I hate the phrase "fake it till you make it" and a few alternatives. Interesting article, interesting perspective, philosophy that I don't personally necessarily agree with, although the perspective of it is unique and again touches on the topic of your squad and your circle. And then finally, the one that probably applies most to Taylor Swift and how her squad came to be is brands. Learn how to market from these musicians. And really goes into how Taylor Swift has cornered the market on the concept of a squad. But enough of T Swift. As we talked about yesterday, which was about being lazy. The art of being lazy and why we all suck at it. So described in yesterday's episode, we're all products of our environment. And we are the controllers of our domain. We make our squad, if you will. And in looking at our environment, from early childhood development to adulthood and beyond, it's an interesting journey if you take a moment to sit and think about it. There's several different things that help create our environment that become influencers, if you will, that really help paint the path of who we are and our journey. And some of these things are out of our control. Some of these things because of where we are in life. Maybe as a child, we don't necessarily have as much influence over who we surround ourselves with, our environment. We can only play in the sandbox because we have certain dimensions. You can get out to the phrase of it. You can go dig in the corner. You can go in the middle. But there's still barriers, if you will. And the best reference I can give to this is school. And the people that you are surrounded with in school. And growing up, as I talked about in being lazy and described the story of being paired up with failing individuals and how much I dislike schoolwork or group work, is the people that were surrounded by me. I was actually, as an introverted person, yet being a little bit naive, was often picked on and bullied growing up. And I didn't really have a strong circle, if you will. And this was the first time, I think, in my life, I really started to understand and grasp the concept of surrounding yourself with certain individuals. I was the type of person that I wanted everybody to like me, as I mentioned before. I wanted everybody to like me, and so even the people that picked on me and bullied me, I still, even after getting the shit kicked out of me, would still go back to them and try and befriend them because I felt sorry for them that they didn't have any friends. It didn't matter that they were an asshole. I felt bad for them. And my mother used to tell me all the time, like, stay away from them. Why do you keep going back? Like, you should get your ass kicked because they kick the shit out of you, and then you go back to them and you're almost apologizing for them. Like, oh, it's okay that you got your teeth knocked out. And it was in middle school. I was basically beat up in a bathroom and wound up, my parents didn't press charges, but it was a threat. And that's when I realized that in trying to be an individual and in being shy and being very much an introvert, I needed to make sure that I was surrounded by the right individuals. And the interesting thing is this really does hold serve. I mean, it helps when you're only 5'8" and 150 pounds that there's a lot of mammoth mammals out there. So finding and befriending people that are exponentially larger than you is not necessarily challenging. But I think with our environment, with our squad, oftentimes we are drawn towards people that are very much like ourselves. And you see this in social, racial circles all the time, where you befriend and you gravitate towards people that are like you because they're going to understand you. Just what's so unique about this squad concept is essentially you're like a GM, if you will, in trying to optimize and surround yourself around the best people you possibly can. And so in school, after getting beat up in the bathroom, I realized I needed people that this bully, if you will, would fear, that they would be intimidated, they wouldn't pick on me. And so I literally had 6 to 8 friends, people that I befriended, became close with, still this day keep in contact with them. And they were all 6 feet tall or larger as a 6th grader in middle school, right? These were a select rare breed in my school, at least. And I was friends with all of them. So as you could imagine, little Jesse Liebman at age 10 being, gosh, at that time, probably maybe 4 feet tall and 60 pounds, being surrounded by a bunch of 6 foot tall, 100-pound 10-year-olds also, but behemoths. Unless it was a bully that was of their stature or height, which they weren't because I befriended all of them, they, for whatever reason, and I've seen it, would be intimidated. Size is intimidating for whatever reason, even though and I've been criticized of this, of having a Napoleonic complex, but typically speaking, when somebody is looking down upon you, that is an intimidating position to be in. You fear that they're going to come back and kick the crap out of you. So the next time I encountered this so-called bully, if you will, and I had my quote-unquote squad around me, it was a different sheet of music. Essentially, and it wasn't something that we choreographed or anything else, but magically, because I had befriended these people, because they trusted me, they liked me, they thought I was a good person, they casually moved me behind them, and it was, you have to deal with us. And that was the end of my issues or problems, really going forward, there forward. And so from that point forward into high school, I tried to befriend any and everyone. I wanted everyone on my team because if I had everyone on my team, or as many people as possible, if I ever ran into a bully again, or somebody that was picking on me or what have you, they had to deal with my circle. And my circle, because I was loyal to a fault almost, they would have my back through and through. So school was a huge impact for me in terms of my circle and developing this concept of having a squad. Another one, which kind of goes hand in hand with school, is your activity circles. So for me, sports was a huge circle for me. I was never talented enough to do anything real competitive. It was always a recreational leagues, but I was a soccer and basketball kid. And well, I guess unfortunately for me and for my sense, I was always going to the opposite elementary school, the opposite middle school as the majority of the people that were on my sports teams. So I had that interaction with them during practice and then for games on Saturdays, but for the most part, I then didn't see them. It wasn't until high school that everybody funneled in, and there's 2 high schools essentially that is where I grew up. There's Tigard High School and Tualatin High School, so there were still some people that went off to Tualatin, but the majority of the people that I played sports with, we all went to Tigard. And so it was like a realignment of like, oh yeah, I remember when I played basketball, we were on the same team in the 4th grade. A lot of the same people were always on the same team. It was kind of a geographical thing, kind of a talent thing, if you will. But these people helped surround me and be a part of that circle. The music department was another huge thing, huge influence on my life. As I mentioned, in high school, I did any and everything that I possibly humanly could do. And so I was in the pep band, so I played for all the sporting, the basketball specifically, not in the marching band. Marching band did the football games. So I did pep band, I did the concert band, I did the drum line, I did jazz band, and so I was a band geek through and through as a drummer. Band geek through and through. And while these weren't the most intimidating individuals, and as a band geek, it was more the jocks that had the intimidation factor, but these people had other things that helped develop me as a person. The jocks were there and helped me and pushed me to be the best athlete that I could possibly be. And these music people, they had different interests aside from music and aside from the jocks that were into sports. You know, the jocks taught me actually a lot about music and rap music in particular and hardcore rock. And there's some things of that I still listen to as a result of those influences. You're not going to find too many band geeks, if you will, that are really into Jay-Z because they're very much purist. And so I learned a lot more in classical music, in jazz music, because that's what they gravitated towards. Different than the jocks if we're just strictly talking music. And then activity teams. As I mentioned, I was president of the Japanese National Honor Society. That is completely different than either of those 2 social groups. Either of those 2 social groups. I can tell you there was no jocks in the Japanese that even took Japanese, and a couple crossover in terms of the band geeks to Japanese, but very, very few. And so I had the nice thing was, in my effort to be well-rounded and surrounding myself by as many people as humanly possible, I had all sorts of different influences. And while I didn't really feel like I came into my own in really trying to establish who I was as an individual and who I wanted to be until probably 3 to 4 years after college. But all of these influences gave me a perspective. They helped me in the time be the best person that I could possibly be. And that's really what your squad is all about. Another way of looking at it is your friend group. And that could go hand in hand with school and with the activities that you do, but your friends, the people. You look at a show like Entourage, one of my all-time favorite, or Seinfeld and Entourage are the 2 that just, and Curb Your Enthusiasm. Those 3 come right off the top of my head. But Entourage, I feel like, was pre-Squad, if you will, before T. Swift knew what the Squad was. And maybe it was an influencer. Maybe that's where the Squad concept came from, as she saw what they were doing on Entourage and tried to harness that. if you will. But it's really this same concept of that you've got your friend group and each person is good at what they do. Each person brings a different thing to the table. Because if you're in a certain specific group like the jocks or like the music group, you're all going to be kind of similar. But then your friend group, they could be very different. I look at my friend group and just in what they do for a living. One guy is a lumber salesman. Another guy is a PE teacher for middle school. Another person, he's a regional financial director for the Department of Transportation. And then another guy's a personal trainer. Another one's works for Wells Fargo and is an underwriter. So all very different backgrounds, and yet we have a commonality in an activity circle that has brought us together. But we have different backgrounds. We have some similarities, but different backgrounds. We all bring something different to the table. We all have our own strengths. We have some similarities. And then, of course, work. Work being, as I like to call it, once you get out of school and you have lost that sorority, that club environment, if you will, the dorm life, that is essentially your continuing education of being a part of a group. And there's been several different jobs that I've had where it is very cliquey, very circle oriented. And it's not even necessarily the family-owned businesses that I've been a part of. I mean, that's a natural and obvious connection, is having a family-owned business. But even within each job that you're within, you know the circles. You've got the 3-4 people that are together, and it's just like a social clique, like you're in school all over again. You've got the jocks, the people in music, the anime people. And it's the same thing within work. But if we peel back the next layer, if we get away from just the majority of our time where we spend, which is typically either going to be school or it's going to be work or certain activities that we have, the bigger and broader sense of things is really your network. And I'm a huge proponent of LinkedIn. I'll link to it on pausethinkconsider.com/squad. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. And for me, it's about having that Rolodex. It's the new school Rolodex is the way that I like to equate LinkedIn. And I try and keep it very, very separate from any other form of social media. Facebook, that's for fun. Twitter, that's staying connected. YouTube, it's video oriented. And are there people in Instagram as well? Photo, video oriented, Snapchat, etc. All these different channels, in my opinion, they can be leveraged, and companies and businesses are leveraging them, and I've done it before as a social media manager, if you will. But LinkedIn, I like it because it's still very much separate and it's business. It's becoming a little more crowded, and because Facebook is so saturated, because Twitter is so saturated, people are now trying to leverage LinkedIn for attention. And they're trying to leverage it in a manner that they have for Facebook. And I've seen flat out petitions out there for closing down LinkedIn, getting rid of LinkedIn because they've gone to the dark side. It's just the next Facebook. Well, maybe for those individuals, but who I surround myself and who's a part of my online Rolodex are very much business-oriented people. And While on Facebook, I don't have as many friends as I have connections on LinkedIn, because every person that I come in contact with from a learning standpoint, this is somebody that I could gain value from. They're a part of my LinkedIn. They're essentially my squad in a digital representation way. Maybe you have a different manner. Maybe Facebook is the way that you do this, and you leverage all the people that are on Facebook in order to create your network. But for me personally, it's LinkedIn. And so how, as I described school and work and activities and all of these things that ultimately help create your environment, and which give you the influence to create your work ethic, to create your morals, to just simply create your physical ethics and beliefs and what you believe in, it comes down to developing and creating your squad. So there's 3 things that I want to talk about in terms of how you can develop your squad. First one being, and this is probably an overused term, very marketing jargon, but doing a SWOT analysis of yourself. SWOT analysis, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's identifying your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So physically doing an audit would be another way of describing it. Doing an audit of yourself. And in doing this, you're trying to determine and figure out, what are you good at? What are you bad at? What do you want to learn? And what do you need to learn? So it's really focusing. You can go more detailed, more in depth, but I'm just trying to keep it simple. So what are you good at? What are you bad at? What do you want to learn? And what do you need to learn? After you've done this analysis, if you don't know who you are and you don't know what you're good at or bad at, how can you possibly know what you need? You have to internally look at yourself to identify who could possibly be a part of your squad and who would be beneficial. And I know one of my buddies, the guy who works for the Department of Transportation, he's gone through what's called a 360 analysis, a 360 review. And I'll post a link to what this actually does. But the basic concept of it is looking at from yourself and then looking at your peers and taking all these influencers and different perspectives to tell you what your strengths, what your weaknesses are, and what you need to work on. So to take it a step further, instead of just doing a SWOT analysis and only using your own perspective, if you want to be completely transparent with yourself, I suggest getting those people that you trust and those people that you care their opinion, because I am a huge believer that if you are not willing to change, if you are an individual that is not willing to actually consider the opinion that is given to you, then don't ask the question. So if you're willing to make change and it's somebody that you trust, ask the question. Have the courage to ask the question. There's some things you might know and might be obvious, and there's other things that might not know. Again, we said in the first episode, an opinion is just one person's perspective at a single moment of time. It's not right. It's not wrong. It is their opinion, and it can change. It's just simply in that moment what they think of you. So I think that's very valuable. And in order to determine and develop your squad, you have to have a firm understanding of yourself, where you want to go, and what you need to do it. So after you have this, after you've done this audit, this analysis of yourself, you have to go find those missing pieces to make yourself great. The correlation that I will make is you're like the general manager of a sports team. You're the founder. You're an entrepreneur of a startup. And that startup, that team is you. That team, that startup is you. And just like if you're the CEO of your company or you're a C-level employee, you're the person who ultimately is moving that direction. And you have to take that ownership. There's a lot of really, really great articles and information about being the CEO of yourself and that thinking of yourself as a brand, as a business. Because as I've learned over the years, nobody is going to advocate for you as much as you advocate for yourself. If you have a fear of self-promotion, then how can you expect anybody else to promote you? Because as we discussed earlier this week, we are a very self-centered, selfish society. And quite frankly, if you're not willing to put in the work and to make the steps necessary in order to make yourself great, how can you expect anyone else? That comes down to, like we talked yesterday about, just simply being lazy. Just not wanting to put in the work. So after you've analyzed yourself, you know what you're good at, you know what you're bad at, you know what you want to learn, you know what you need to learn, you go find those missing pieces. Analyze your circle, analyze your squad, and figure out what is it that you're not great at. So when I came to the conclusion, when I was let go from my job about a month ago, I came to the conclusion that I wanted to do a podcast. I'd done the blog thing, failed, burnt out. This podcasting thing, though, was unique, and I wanted to do it. And I knew that 90% of people who say they want to do things, they fail because they don't follow through. So I wanted to follow through, and I needed to find somebody that helped propel me. I needed to surround myself with individuals that were inspiring, that got me off my ass and to the mic. And as I thanked him in episode number 1, Greg Day, who's the producer, founder, CEO of his own domain in the Weekly Portland podcast, he was my inspiration. He's the person that I've surrounded myself to inspire me to continue going each and every day. And the great thing is we email each other, 3 to 5 times a day and just pumping each other up. And he says, man, you're killing it. You're killing it. Just the fact that you go out there and you're physically doing this on a daily basis is great. And I go, dude, you're killing it. Like, you interview 3 to 5 people every week. I just have to turn on the damn mic and speak into it. I don't need to talk to anybody, come up with questions, figure out all sorts of different subjects and how that's going to work. And like, that's hard. And so we feed off of each other. He's a part of my podcasting squad, if you will. That inspires me to go forward, that inspires me to be the best that I can be. And then I look at somebody like Gary Vee and I see what he does. I see what Tim Ferriss is doing. And while all 3 of them I've never met in person, 2 of them being just in the complete digital sense of they don't even know who I am. I've sent Gary Vee an email, but they don't know who I am. Like, they are a part of my squad, whether they know it or not. I might not be a part of their squad. They might not consider me a part of their squad. Maybe I'm like indirectly a part of it just because they're a part of mine, but they help fuel me. They've taught me so much, whether they know it or not, that they are the missing piece for me in order to produce this program on a day in, day out basis. And so once you find those missing pieces, and this is probably the hardest thing to do, and it's been the hardest thing for me personally, because again, I'm a person, I want to make as many people happy as possible. I genuinely care about other people's feelings and making them feel included and just being a good dude and a great person. But the hard thing is, and it's just like gardening, you got to cultivate and you got to purge. You got to cultivate and you got to purge. And it doesn't matter the type of relationship or the type of person that it is. It could be your boss, could even be a family member, could be that best friend that you've had since the second grade. But if you're analyzing and being completely transparent with yourself, you know deep down if those people are holding you back. And that's not saying that you 100% cut ties with them and you never talk to them again. It might be necessary. Hopefully it's not, because that would be even more challenging. But you might have to limit the interactions you have. And I've had to go through this, and it's been one of the toughest lessons I've ever had to learn is being able to step back. And I think the greatest example is relationships. And it just saddens me because divorce is, every time I hear somebody getting a divorce, especially if it's in my circle of acquaintances, of friends, it makes me want to vomit. It literally physically makes me sick to my stomach. And it will definitely be a subject that we talk about for future episodes, but the whole concept of cutting ties, and you hear all the time, whether it's abusive relationships or just relationships that are unhealthy, you get comfortable. You're comfortable. Even though you are freaking miserable on a day in, day out basis, you get comfortable and you settle and you stop growing. If you stop watering the plant, you stop giving it food, it dies. I am an expert at it. Believe me. The basil plant that came from Trader Joe's that was supposed to be indestructible, guess what? It's in the compost pile. It's possible. And if it's the hardest thing to do, it really is, to take a step back, look at the relationship you're in and say, you know what? I'm not progressing. I'm not getting to where I need to be. And that's where always being adaptable. You gotta be improving. You gotta be adapting. And if you're not, then you gotta find somebody that can do it. You have to feed those relationships. And if it's not giving back, you gotta purge it. As my aunt has this great saying, and I'd like to think that I live by it, but I guess I would be kind of a man whore if I did, to a certain degree. But she really hits on a great point of, if you ain't getting paid or getting laid, get out. If you ain't getting paid or getting laid, get out. And really, the concept and theory of that is a relationship is a give and take. It can't all be one-sided. And maybe her example is harsh. Maybe it's crass. But she's got a great point. That if you're not getting something in return of that relationship, something that's making you better, that's helping you get to that goal, then why are you in it? Why are you in it? And so you have to constantly nurture your squad, nurture your circle, and always reevaluating. Yeah, you do that baseline analysis, that baseline audit of what you're good at, bad at, want to learn, need to learn, but things change. It's just like the stock market. Life is a stock market. It's up, it's down, but everything's cyclical. Everything is on a trend. Everything comes back. There's things that were pop. I'm waiting for when Pogs come back. If anybody remembers Pogs, I still have them. And if If that came back, you would think, but it's not digital. So why the hell is anybody going to want to play with Pogs anymore? But I still have some Pogs and a microscopic part of that collection. Huge Pog collector back in the day. But everything comes back. And so you have to constantly be analyzing your circle, your squad. And if maybe things change. Things change. Now you're initially interested in doing podcasting. We'll use myself as an example. I'm interested in doing podcasting now, but 3 months from now, you know what? I'm interested in doing film production. Screw this podcasting thing. I'm moving on. And I know people will say, oh, it's the millennial. They can't stick to something, so on and so forth. It's ADHD. Nobody can focus anymore. Their attention spans are getting lower and lower. People change. People develop. The people that are able to stay in one circle or one sphere their entire life, are they the best person that they can possibly be? Or is there some weaknesses? And that's not to say that you need to completely abandon and go all in. I know that some people, that if you're not all in, you can't do it. And that is on my sheet of music, very much so. When I go for something, I go all in. And if you've moved on, well, you have to realign your circle. You have to rebalance. It's just like a portfolio. So, in recap, your circle or hashtag #, whatever you want to call it, squad, you are in control. You are the GM. You are the founder of your domain. And that circle, that environment helps define you. It is what makes you, you. There's your school, there's sports activities, there's your friend group, work, your network. There's all different methods and all different groups in which help influence your ultimate squad or your dream team. But there's 3 things you have to do in order to develop your squad to be the best that you possibly can be. You have to analyze yourself. What are you good at, bad at, want to learn, need to learn? Go find the missing pieces and then cultivate, grow, nurture those pieces. And when it's not working, hit the flush button and purge. I want to thank everybody for listening in today. Please check out the website at pausethinkconsider.com/squad. Please go on to Facebook, interact with us, let us know what you like, what you don't like, share your comments, facebook.com/pause.think.consider, and everybody enjoy the weekend. I look forward to talking to you all next week on Pause, Think, Consider.